I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. Oh, scrap. Hello, Paper Peeps, and welcome to episode 2 of Why You Should Play Paperverse Games. I'm your host, Jeev Javari, and today I'm beyond excited to look at today's game. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who watched episode 1 and left their thoughts on it. Absolutely humbling for me and great motivation to keep going. Also, thank you to everyone who watched this year's Paperverse Direct. It was an absolute blast to not only be a part of, but also help manage behind the scenes. Well, mostly a blast. You would not believe how many Excel spreadsheets are needed to run Paperverse. It's a ghastly amount. But our development partners and you guys especially make it all worth the effort. Anyways, sappiness aside, today's game is one that I have a lot to say about, so let's get straight into it. You know that famous quote by Vladimir Lenin? The one that goes, "It is necessary sometimes to take one step backwards to take 2 steps forward"? Well, yeah, that's essentially what this game is. Let me introduce you to Culabra, Souls of Limbo, a Paper Mario-inspired RPG that ditches the traditional turn-based combat for a more puzzle and character-focused experience. Uh-oh, I can see the dissents already. What, no turn-based combat? What is this? Thought this was the Paperverse. No, I know our avid viewers understand the Paperverse very well, but for those unaware, yes, the Paperverse has all sorts of games with varying styles of gameplay. It's honestly staggering how different the gameplay can be between games, even ones drawing inspiration from the same sources. Like, yes, these are both inspired by Paper Mario. Stunning, I know. So Souls of Limbo has no combat, but it does have conflict. Ooh, more on that later. Right now, let's talk about the brilliant minds behind this game. We have the Lar brothers to thank for this one. Meet Pavel and Paulo, a dynamic duo originally from the Dominican Republic. Yes! I'll come back to the Lar brothers in a second. Let's take a trip down to the Caribbean real quick. Now, the Dominican Republic is a very beautiful country with a rich culture, lovely beaches, excellent food, and a mythos that's so powerful, its influences reach far and wide throughout the world, and the influences are totally on display. I'm sure the very astute have already noticed the Dia de los Muertos core aesthetic that Culabra uses. Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, is a holiday that honors the dead with festivals and lively celebrations. Assured that the dead would be insulted by mourning or sadness, Dia de los Muertos celebrates the lives of the deceased with food, drinks, parties, and activities the dead enjoyed in life. Day of the Dead recognizes death as a natural part of the human experience, a continuum with birth, childhood, and growing up to become a contributing member of the community. On Day of the dead are also part of the community, awakened from the eternal slumber to share celebrations with their loved ones. Very, very beautiful. Now, Dia de los Muertos is most strongly associated with Mexico, where the tradition originated, and because of that, there's a sentiment floating around that Day of the Dead is essentially Spanish Halloween. But that is absolutely not the case. This is an important distinction to make because I don't want you to go into this game thinking you're going to see watered down undertones like that. No candy corn, witches on broomsticks, or TP'd houses here. It's all authentic. Oh, speaking of authenticity, you know that extremely famous picture of the skull lady with the beautiful dress? Yeah, this picture is basically the icon for Day of the Dead, and it took me a little bit of digging to find out why. Now turn your attention to these. The most prominent symbols related to the Day of the Dead are the calacas, which are skeletons, and the calaveras, which are skulls. In the early 20th century, the printer and cartoonist José Guadalupe Posada incorporated skeletal figures in his art, mocking politicians and commenting on revolutionary politics of the time. His most well-known work, La Calavera Catrina, or Elegant Skull, features a female skeleton adorned with makeup and dressed in fancy clothes. The 1910 etching was intended as a statement about Mexicans adopting European fashions over their own heritage and traditions. La Calavera Catrina was then adopted as one of the most recognizable Day of the Dead icons. Absolute definition of task failed successfully. Can't get people to stop adopting European culture? Well, change the entire culture itself. It's genius. And you know who else is genius? Yeah, these guys. They've crafted an experience that's very clever and engaging. It's also very ironic, and I specifically mean dramatic irony. You see, dramatic irony is a mechanic in literature where we as the readers know what's going on, but the surrounding cast of characters don't. Personally for me, Hamlet is one of the greatest examples of that. It's chock full of dramatic irony. Like for example, in Act 2, Scene 2, you have Polonius believing Hamlet has gone mad as a result of unrequited love. The audience knows it not to be true because earlier in the play, Hamlet decided to pretend to be crazy in order to investigate the role Claudius may have had in old King Hamlet's death. And that style of irony is built into the core of this game. Now, since literature and video games aren't quite the same beast, you have to treat dramatic irony differently, I would argue. Most cinematic games will take the literary approach of showing scenes that we as the players have nothing to do with. So you get a story-beat cutscene, and now you as the player knows what's happened, but the protagonist has no idea what's going on. Culebra doesn't take that approach. You actually start off not knowing jack diddly squat, but as you interact with people and progress throughout the day, you learn new information, and then, bam, the entire day resets and you go back to the start of that day. There's this curse that hangs over Limbo, where most inhabitants will have their memories wiped from that day, and they'll go back to the day prior as if nothing happened. Everyone's stuck in a powerful loop. It's a curse that ties them to the afterlife and keeps them from being able to move on. The key about the curse is that the souls are afflicted with deep regrets, and that's what keeps them tied to Limbo, unable to move on. But hey, our noodly friend Culebra isn't beholden to the curse. He can remember and notate events and details from the day before. So you start off like everybody else, not knowing what's going on, but you quickly rise to the occasion and pocket dramatic irony as a tool in your utility belt. Now, I love this mechanic, and truth be told, I'm not sure of any other games that do this. There's probably one out there, and maybe a really famous one, but I honestly cannot recall it. And what makes this mechanic so interesting to me is that by its design, it shouldn't advance your progress. By all accounts, it should actually impede you, but it doesn't. Now, yes, the retaining of your memory is a big part of that, but believe it or not, there's a natural flow or sense of progression with the way the day resets. I think a part of that is actually the excellent presentation of the game. Yes, more on that later. Right now, let's talk about the actual gameplay. Now, disclaimer, all of my footage and thoughts come from the demo, which is available for you to play right now. I'll have proper links and overview later on in the video, but just want to make it clear that this is not the full game. But it's an extremely polished experience, so don't feel afraid by that. So you take control of Culebra, Snake Skeleton and Memorization Champ. You wake up in Limbo and your immediate goal is to press on forward and leave Dead Valley. But uh-oh, the main gate is locked, but no problem, just go ask some residents for help. Ah yes, ask me tomorrow, I'll help then. Man, anyone else have family members like this? You ask them for something and get the come back tomorrow runaround? Anyways, the residents themselves aren't going to be of much direct help. No, you spend most of your time actually helping them and analyzing their behaviors and patterns. They have schedules, and thanks to this curse, they keep to it. And in some cases, even objects can be cursed. Yeah, cursed objects have strong emotional attachments to them, and when the day resets, they go back to their start as well. So that's your overall goal currently, but what about your immediate abilities? What can an armless fellow like this do? Well, you've got this nice little slither for you to take in the sights with. Then you've got your notebook, of course, that you can use to keep track of important people, details about them, and your current objectives. You've also got this slick rolling ability, and it gives off the most satisfying bonk sound I've ever heard. Then you've got your inventory where you keep your items, and you've also got examine and combine actions, both of which you'll need. See, in Limbo, you start off with nothing, and by the end of the demo, you really still only have the bare necessities. This game nails this feeling of starting from scratch and having to make do with meager means. You are not getting many handouts in this game. You gotta work and scrounge for resources, and the game really rewards you for your attention to detail. See, this isn't a large level or expansive map. You're confined to this area, and the resources here are just enough to get you through. It makes you feel like a true survivor or pioneer, but even in this small space, you still get a good sense of scale. Dead Valley is very impressive looking, and there's some real majesty going on here. Yeah, let's talk about the presentation now, specifically the graphics. Oh, they're good. Like I said earlier, the Paperverse is extremely varied and fluid with its gameplay, but the same is true for the different art styles and graphics. Now, most developers will usually fall into two camps when it comes to graphics and art styles. In one camp, you've got the flat 2D guys running around in a 3D world, what most think of when you say Paper Mario. And on the other side, you've got, well, everybody else. They take artistic liberties, but capture the essence of Paper Mario through their rock-solid gameplay. It takes a serious understanding of the game to be able to not only pull that off, but pull it off effectively too. Anyhow, Kulabra falls into Camp 1, and he's really in another special group with the other devs who are deploying a papercraft aesthetic. Please don't underestimate how much time and effort goes into creating a very convincing papercraft look. I mean, just look at that. The cardboard is perforated, and that's small and probably not that interesting to you on its own, but I really love stuff like this. Can never get enough. And the team is no slouch on graphical features either. The one thing you'll notice right away is the tasteful use of depth of field, although they use it a little differently. You see, industry standard deployment of depth of field is usually to blur the background as to bring attention to the foreground and characters as well. But here you can see a subtle blurring effect on foreground objects. Now that's not anything crazy or super out there for graphics deployment, but I bring it up because it's another thoughtful choice that accents the developer's intentions with this area. Also, the post-processing effects for heat haze and dust rolling is actually amazing. You don't notice it much in motion, but it's another one of those small details that tie things all together. Small details are great, like screen space ambient occlusion. Yeah, for those unaware, screen space ambient occlusion, or SSAO, is an alternative to standard ambient occlusion. It's used a lot for games that have low visual settings. Instead of using, shapes to gauge space and shadow placement, SSAO utilizes a bit of deception. Now that's the techie definition, but it's basically a graphical effect that adds subtle shadows to crevices, cracks, under lips of objects, and general spaces like that. It's all shadow placement, and the shadows here are just beautiful. On higher settings, you can really see how sharp and lovely they are. Now, I don't mean to nerd out about some of these little details, but I really can't help it. Every developer deploys these features differently, and it's so interesting to see the technique. Though all of these graphical features come with the balancing act of maintaining stable performance. We often assume that indie games have an easy time having great performance because they're generally smaller in scope and deployment, but that's not always the case. It's honestly a bit of a stigma that can negatively impact a developer and wrongfully label their project. Though I'm happy to report that in Souls of Limbo's case, performance is great. I'm always in the pursuit of a stable 60 frames per second or the closest metric to it, and you're getting an extremely locked 60 here. Even on the lower end of the hardware spectrum, you can claw back very good performance. You see, the hot new item in the tech world right now is Valve's Steam Deck, and thanks to a developer friend of mine, I was actually able to get some performance readouts and video capture of it running on deck. Very exciting stuff, and a huge thank you to Aurelius over on Discord for recording and testing the demo for me. Much appreciated. Though performance and graphics are only one piece of the presentation pie, there's also the music, which again is very, very good. Most of the tracks here are what I would describe as thoughtful, and some invoke emotions of a sort of mystical vibe. The start menu theme especially gives me that wistful feeling, like there's something missing from my life that I need to reach out and find. Hey, here, let's take a listen. Very good, huh? I'm a huge fan of the way the strings are used in this song. Lots of whole and half notes used in a sort of swinging succession. They rise and fall slowly and in a rhythm that's kind of reminiscent of a gentle wave. The music was composed by Zach Seifel, and I've got to say that he did a bang-up job. A game with a heavy narrative like this should have an equally as strong score to prop it up. Another track I'm all over is actually the Dead Valley daytime theme. Yeah, it sticks out to me because it's another one of those hopeful tracks in the game. Here, let's listen to it really quick. It's a slower tempo, yes, but you still feel energized listening to it. A strange dichotomy, feeling pumped up from a slower paced track, but it works well. Oh, hey, word of the day right there. Yeah, dichotomy. A dichotomy is a division or contrast between two things that are or are represented as being opposed or entirely different. In this case, the slow tempo of the track combined with its upbeat nature make it a contrasting blend that still comes together harmoniously. It's all a beautiful package, and I could rant all day about this game. But honestly, it all comes back to the question posed by this series. Why should you play Culabra Souls of Limbo? Well, you should play it because the game is a great embodiment of the human experience. It's so easy to become desensitized to your feelings and even to the things and people you care about. The world isn't the best place right now, and sometimes we go numb to everything happening around us without us even knowing it. It reminds you that there's that darkness in all of us and that sooner or later we'll need to confront it. The question is, will you let it consume you, or will you embrace the hard facts of life and grow? Life isn't perfect, but it can be beautiful. Well, that's going to do it for this video, but I just want to say thank you all for watching, and a huge thank you to the Paperverse community as a whole. Greatest group of people I've ever had the pleasure of being connected with. Oh yes, please go check out Souls of Limbo on Steam and itch.io. The demo is up for you to try, and like I said earlier, it's an amazing experience. It's a very great slice of the game. You should also check out the Culabra Souls of Limbo Kickstarter page. Oh yeah, it's a relaunch for them, and as a community, we should all go out and show our support. As of the time of this recording, the campaign is live right now. I've linked that down below too, and I hope you can all check it out. Even if pledging is beyond your means, I'd like to ask that you still please share the campaign around to friends, family members, or just people online in general. Spreading the word is very important, and as many people as possible should hear about this game and give it a try. This is a game deserving of being fully funded, so let's rally behind them and make it happen. And as usual, feel free to check out the Paperverse socials as well. There's our Twitter, of course, and there's no forgetting our lovely Discord community where you can chat it up with the devs of Culabra and many more. Well, that'll be all from me. Adios, and I'll see you all next time. Oh, right. Join me then because I'll be taking a look at a game that also has deep reflections of life, but also a veneer of something deeper and darker beneath. All is not really what it seems. Ciao.